Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on Henrietta Lacks,
Okay.
a black woman who went to Johns Hopkins in 1951 to get treatment for cervical cancer.
Great.
And we are going to be using as our primary source, Chapter 8, A Miserable Specimen from Rebecca Skloot's book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to get a sense of Henrietta's experience as a patient, especially, within the racial and medical context of the time.
It's a story that really brings to light all the power dynamics that were going on at the time, especially for Black patients going through a segregated healthcare system.
Yeah, from the very beginning of the chapter, Skloot kind of gives this unsettling picture of Henrietta talking to her doctors about the cancer spreading.
Right.
And, they do their exams, and nothing really alarming seems to come up for them.
Yeah.
And there's even like a note from one of the doctors in her chart that says, "No evidence of recurrence. Return in 1 month." And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
knowing what we know now, it's like, oh.
It's pretty chilling when you think about it. You have to think about how different medical practice was back then.
Right.
In the 1950s, you saw this huge adoption of what they call benevolent deception, where doctors would often withhold information from patients.
Really?
Yeah, they thought they were like protecting patients from difficult medical details or diagnoses. That would be upsetting. So imagine, being diagnosed with a serious illness and your doctor only telling you what they think you need to know.
Right. Like they're making decisions for the patient, not with the patient.
Exactly.
Wow. Do you think that was even more pronounced for Black patients like Henrietta?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Baltimore in 1951.
Yeah.
A segregated city. And Black patients faced just immense challenges, from straight up discrimination to just limited access to health care.
Yeah.
Questioning a white doctor's authority was simply not an option for a lot of people.
So even if Henrietta had doubts, the social norms of the time might have prevented her from really, pushing back or asking more questions.
Exactly.
What about the actual treatment that she received? Did that seem to align with what white patients were getting at the time?
Yeah, the book highlights that Henrietta got what was considered the standard treatment for cervical cancer
Okay.
at the time: biopsy, radium, and radiation.
Okay.
So, on the surface, it seems equitable.
Right.
But there's this darker reality beneath the surface.
Okay.
Studies from that time show this disturbing trend. Black patients were often only treated and hospitalized at later stages of their illnesses.
Wow.
And even after being hospitalized, they received less pain medication and had higher mortality rates.
It makes you wonder how those statistics intersect with Henrietta's case.
For sure.
I mean, even if her race wasn't like a direct factor in the decisions that were made, it's hard to ignore that historical context.
Exactly. And what makes it even more, heartbreaking is how quickly Henrietta's condition gets worse.
Right.
Even though her doctor said she was fine.
Yeah.
It's like her body's screaming for help.
Yeah.
But no one's listening.
Yeah. And Skloot really captures that feeling that something is wrong.
Yeah.
Like just a few weeks after being told there's no recurrence, Henrietta goes back to Hopkins complaining of pain.
Right.
And then a few weeks after that, she's back again.
Yeah.
This time with like severe abdominal pain, difficulty urinating. But even then, she's sent home.
It's unimaginable, the fear and uncertainty she must have been feeling, going from this glimmer of hope to this rapidly worsening condition.
Yeah.
And her family, watching this whole thing unfold, must have just been terrified.
And Skloot actually includes a quote from Sadie,
Oh, yeah.
Henrietta's cousin.
Right.
And Sadie just describes Henrietta's decline in this really powerful way.
Yeah.
She says, her eyes were telling you that she wasn't going to be alive no more.
Yeah.
It's like a premonition.
It's chilling. And it really emphasizes how deeply Henrietta was suffering.
Right.
I mean, beyond the physical.
Right.
The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being trapped in a body that's betraying you.
And it just gets worse from there.
Right.
She ends up being admitted to the hospital.
Right.
And Skloot just takes us through these harrowing descriptions of Henrietta's pain.
Right.
And the increasingly desperate attempts to manage it.
Yeah, they tried to up the radiation,
Right.
desperately hoping to shrink the tumors and give her some relief. But it seems like it just made the pain worse.
Oh, well.
Then they tried different pain medications,
Yeah.
even resorting to alcohol injections directly into her spine.
And nothing worked.
Nothing
Yeah.
seemed to work. There's this heartbreaking scene where Henrietta's watching her children play on the lawn from her hospital window.
Uh-huh.
But eventually she gets too weak to even do that.
Oh, wow.
It's such a powerful image. a mother separated from her children
Right.
by this invisible barrier of pain and illness.
It really highlights just how limited medicine was at the time,
Yeah.
but also it really humanizes Henrietta.
Right.
She's not just a name in a medical chart.
Exactly.
She's a mother.
Yeah. A wife, a woman with hopes and dreams,
Right.
forced to confront her own mortality.
Yeah, and it's during this incredibly vulnerable time that the story takes this ethically complicated turn.
Oh, yeah.
So while Henrietta is going through this unimaginable suffering,
Right.
a nurse draws her blood,
Yeah.
and she labels the vial colored.
Wow.
And later, a doctor, acting on George Gay's request,
Yeah.
takes additional cells from Henrietta's cervix.
That simple notation, colored,
Yeah.
really says a lot
Yeah.
about the casual racism that was everywhere back then
Right.
in society and in the medical field.
Yeah.
It's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
Reducing Henrietta to her race.
Right.
Not even recognizing her as an individual.
Yeah.
It's a reminder of how Black patients were often seen as just subjects for research.
Right.
Their humanity pushed aside,
Yeah.
in the pursuit of scientific advancement.
It's almost unbelievable that something so fundamental to medical ethics now, like informed consent,
Right.
was just completely overlooked.
Yeah.
Was that common practice back then?
Taking cells without informed consent was unfortunately very common.
Really?
Yeah, the concept of informed consent was pretty new,
Yeah.
and people didn't really grasp the implications of using a patient's cells for research.
It's chilling to think about it that way. So what happened to those cells?
Okay, so the first batch of cells taken while she was at home, those thrived in Gay's lab,
Okay.
became the first immortal human cell line.
Okay.
But the second batch, the ones they took when she was already in the hospital, those died right away.
Like her body was already losing the battle.
Exactly, even at a cellular level.
Wow.
But while Henrietta was fighting for her life, something remarkable
Yeah.
and ethically complex was happening with those first cells.
Right.
They were multiplying, growing, becoming something that would change medical research forever.
So while Henrietta's lying there, dying in her hospital bed,
Yeah.
her cells are essentially achieving immortality just a floor below.
It's wild, a stark contrast.
Yeah.
That raises some very unsettling questions.
For sure. One of the biggest questions is, did George Gay, the scientist who cultivated these cells, did he ever actually talk to Henrietta about them?
Well, that's where things get really murky.
Okay.
Skloot interviewed tons of people,
Yeah.
and most said that Gay and Henrietta never even met.
Well,
But there is one outlier account
okay.
from Laura Relian,
Okay.
one of Gay's colleagues.
Right.
She says that Gay told her that he did speak to Henrietta about her cells
Really?
and their potential to become immortal.
Wow. So this alleged conversation,
Oh, right.
if it even happened,
Yeah,
is shrouded in mystery.
totally.
So Aurelian says that Gay supposedly told Henrietta that her cells could help save countless lives,
Right.
and that Henrietta reacted positively to that.
Yeah.
But there's no way to really verify this account,
Right.
and it contradicts everyone else's memory.
It's a puzzle with missing pieces,
Yeah.
leaving us to grapple with what was considered acceptable practice back then.
Right.
Taking cells without informed consent, even if it was intended for the greater good, raises serious questions
Yeah.
about patient autonomy
Yeah.
and the potential for exploitation,
Right.
especially within, the racially charged context of the era.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there's these two totally separate things happening at the same time.
Right.
Henrietta's experience filled with like pain and fear.
Yeah.
And then the scientific narrative where her cells have this promise of breakthroughs and advancements.
And it's so striking how those two narratives intersect or really don't intersect.
Right.
On the one hand, you have these scientists, marveling at the immortality of her cells.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have these medical records that just refer to her as a miserable specimen.
It's like they're talking about two different people.
It is.
It's hard not to see that language as dehumanizing,
For sure.
just reducing her to her illness
Yeah.
and not even acknowledging her as a whole person.
It really speaks to a bigger issue, and it's sadly not unique to Henrietta's case.
Right.
It's just how Black patients were often perceived.
Right.
Not as individuals deserving of dignity and respect,
Right.
but as subjects, as means to an end.
It makes you think about other cases from that era,
Oh, yeah.
like the Tuskegee syphilis study,
Right.
where Black men were denied treatment for syphilis.
Yeah.
So that researchers could observe the progression of the disease.
Right.
It's just a horrific example of exploitation.
Totally in the name of science.
Right.
These cases are just stark reminders of why ethical guidelines and protections are so important
Right.
for research participants. It's not just about doing good science. It's about doing science ethically.
Yeah, and that makes me think, what would have been possible if Henrietta had been fully informed
Right.
and actively involved in the research using her cells?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Like, imagine Henrietta,
Right.
not just as this source of cells,
Yeah.
but as a partner in the research.
Yeah.
Contributing her own insights and experiences. The potential for collaboration, for like truly patient-centered research is mind-boggling.
It really emphasizes how important diversity and representation are in medical research.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just as a matter of fairness, but as a way to improve the quality and relevance of the research itself.
For sure.
We need to make sure that studies are inclusive
Right.
and that the benefits of scientific advancements are shared fairly across all populations.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, diversity isn't just about, like, checking boxes.
Exactly.
It's about bringing a wider range of perspectives and experiences and knowledge to the table.
Yeah.
It leads to better science.
Right.
It helps address health disparities.
Right.
And ultimately ensures that everyone has access to quality care.
For sure. For sure.
So let's shift gears a little bit and
Okay.
talk about the scientific significance of Henrietta's cells.
Okay.
You mentioned that they became the first immortal human cell line.
Right.
What does that actually mean?
So HeLa cells, as they're called, have this remarkable ability to just divide indefinitely in a lab setting. It's something that normal human cells can't do.
Right.
And this makes them so incredibly valuable for research.
Okay.
They've been used to study everything from cancer to viruses to the effects of radiation and toxins.
It's like this unintended legacy.
Yeah.
Born out of tragedy and injustice.
Right.
But ultimately contributing to so many scientific advancements.
Exactly. HeLa cells were like crucial in developing the polio vaccine.
Wow.
And understanding HIV, and even mapping the human genome.
Oh.
They've even been sent into space
Really?
to study the effects of zero gravity on human cells.
It's crazy to think that these cells that were taken without her knowledge or consent have touched so many areas of science and medicine.
It really shows you that complex relationship between scientific progress and the ethical considerations that should guide it.
Yeah.
Henrietta's story is just a reminder that innovation shouldn't come at the cost of human dignity and respect.
So what lessons can we as individuals take away from Henrietta's story? How can we apply these insights to our own lives
Okay.
and our interactions with the healthcare system?
I think first and foremost, it's about being informed advocates for our own health.
Okay.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Seek second opinions. Understand the risks and benefits of any medical procedure or treatment.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo or to speak up if you feel like something's not right.
It's about demanding transparency and respect.
Yes.
And equitable treatment.
Exactly.
We have the right to be active participants in our healthcare,
Right.
not just passive recipients of care.
Absolutely. Henrietta's story, while it's rooted in a time of segregation and unethical practices, has become this powerful catalyst for change. It's a story that pushes us to keep fighting for a future where everyone's health and well-being are valued and protected.
As we reflect on this part of Henrietta's story, I'm struck by this feeling of duality, the scientific marvel of her cells, combined with this deeply personal story of pain and injustice.
It's a powerful reminder that behind every scientific breakthrough, every medical advancement, there are human stories.
Yes.
Stories of hope and resilience, but also stories of suffering and sacrifice.
And it's our responsibility to remember those stories.
Yes.
To honor those who have made scientific progress possible.
Yeah.
And to ensure that we as a society learn from the mistakes of the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about.
It is.
On the one hand, we have these incredible scientific advancements.
Yeah.
That were made possible by HeLa cells impacting so many lives.
Right.
But then on the other hand, there's this unease, knowing that these advancements were built on these ethical missteps and this disregard for Henrietta's autonomy.
It really highlights how important it is to look at scientific progress from different angles. Like, yes, we should celebrate the advancements.
Yeah.
But we should also think critically about how they came about.
Right.
How do we balance the good that's come from HeLa cells with the injustices that Henrietta and her family went through?
It's a question that seems to keep coming up.
It does.
And I imagine it must bring up a lot of complicated emotions for Henrietta's descendants.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Henrietta's family has been through so much over the years.
Right.
They didn't even know about HeLa cells for decades after her death.
Yeah.
And then they had to deal with the fact that their mother cells were being bought and sold and used in research without their knowledge or consent.
It just adds another layer to this already really complex story.
It does.
And it really underscores the need to center the human narrative.
Yeah.
In all of this scientific and medical advancement, we can't just focus on the outcomes. We have to think about the people and the families that are impacted by them.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond just the transactional and having more of a relational approach to science and medicine. It's about acknowledging everyone who has helped make scientific progress possible and making sure that they and their families are treated with respect and dignity.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into Henrietta Lacks's story, is there a final thought you want to leave with our listeners?
I think a lot of times Henrietta's story is framed around the lack of consent and the ethical violations of the past.
Yeah.
And while those are important discussions to have,
Of course.
I think it's just as important to think about how we can do better today.
Right.
How can we as individuals and as a society make sure that medical research and practices are ethical and fair?
It's a call to action, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's about being informed patients, advocating for our health, and holding the healthcare system accountable for being ethical and equitable.
It's about learning from the past to create a better future. A future where everyone benefits from scientific advancements. And where everyone's dignity and autonomy are respected.
This deep dive into Henrietta Lacks's story has been quite a journey.
It has.
It's been enlightening and challenging and really moving.
Yeah.
It's left me thinking about medical ethics in a whole new way.
Right.
And realizing how important it is to be an advocate for your own health.
Absolutely.
And wow, just the lasting legacy of one woman whose cells changed the world.
It's incredible.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, this was great.
And we'll see you next time.